Engaging, provocative, inspirational conversations. Welcome to The Culture Point with Aaron Phillip Clark. My guest today is author Liann Zhang. Liann's debut novel is Julie Chan is Dead, a captivating entry into the thriller genre that centers on Julie Chan, a struggling supermarket cashier who assumes the identity of her successful social influencer twin, Chloe, when she discovers Chloe's lifeless body. Welcome to the show, Liann.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. I did enjoy the book immensely. I actually, I actually found myself learning quite a bit about social media and like what it is to be an influencer. And it makes sense that this would be the perfect kind of backdrop for this kind of story, and kind of the dark side of this celebrity, or the dark side of kind of what it is to be this social influencer and have all these eyes on you and really live and die by these comments that people leave. Which leads me into my first question, which is, my understanding is that you had a background as a influencer, a beauty influencer. And I'm wondering how much of that experience actually made it into the book.
Yeah, I did. During high school, I had like awful cystic acne. So, being a chronically online teenager, of course, the first option for me was to start like a skincare account where I reviewed skincare products and how it affected my skin. Um, this was when I was like 16 years old, so I was super young, but it was kind of during the age where like skincare influencing was really popping off. A lot of the big skincare influencers you see now, like I knew kind of, and they kept going and then I stopped. But in high school, I wasn't like millions of followers like in the book. These are like super influencers, but I was very small. I had like maybe 20,000 followers, 25. Um, and I kind of got a glimpse into that world. All the PR product, the sponsorships, getting invited to brand events, and also just interacting with like other influencers or micro influencers in the category. So in a way, a lot of it did make it through. Like, there's parts of the book where Julie, well, Chloe technically, but also Julie, kind of like, is like looking at engagement and like, interacting with different things. Like that's definitely part of my own experience. And some of the ways that the other influencers talk to each other is kind of influenced also by, group chats I was in. Of course, if you've read the book, things kind of go sideways. That's not based on anything real that I've experienced, but in the sense of that sense of privilege that kind of exists in the backdrop, like it's definitely something that I felt, but on a smaller level, because I didn't have like millions of followers like they did. So, I kind of extrapolated my own experience and like blew it up and made it really extra in a way.
An extra, but at the same time, there's this level of believability there, because I mean, the internet is already such a frightening place to an extent that, it makes sense. And we'll talk a little bit about that later, but how it kind of takes more of a darker turn later in, the later half of the book. So the novel does a great job in terms of subculture of exploring this kind of cult of celebrity, right? But everyone seems so taken by the idea of Chloe. Like even the police seem blindsided, like as if like all logic kind of goes out the window because you're in the presence of this person, right? That you've worked up in your mind, and like they follow this individual, and they feel like they know the person. And I'm wondering, how do you feel about that in terms of the power of celebrity? I mean, is that something that you encountered as an influencer? If people did meet you, was there this kind of almost like a wash of over them of like, oh, wow, here's this person that I followed, and I now believe that I have a connection to them?
I will say personally, I definitely was not big enough to like have imagine if someone was like, oh my God, I know you. I wasn't at that point yet. And interestingly, this was before like reels and stuff. So there wasn't like videos on Instagram yet. So it was like just skincare. Like the only face of me you saw was like on my profile picture. So I feel like most people didn't even know what I looked like. So some people didn't even know my age, actually. Like, people didn't know I was a teenager. They just assumed I was older. Um, and I never clarified it because I was like, whatever, I'm just gonna leave it. And I feel like it gives me more believability if I seem older. Which is another thing, I guess, part of the deception of like pretending to be someone I'm not. But um, so I never got to feel that like specific feeling of like, oh my gosh, you know this person. But personally, as a consumer of social media, there are definitely moments where, especially if it's like a YouTuber or someone that you watch like vlogging, they really give you that glimpse into their life. Like, you see them wake up and they do, their skincare, make meals. Like, it feels like you're really there with them. And in that way, it's like influencers are a celebrity, but where like traditional celebrities hide so much of themselves, like these influencers like voluntarily give everything to you. And that's kind of the relationship like expectation. I feel like a lot of people feel entitled to an influencer's personal life. um at the same time, it's fascinating because like at the end of the day, these influencers go back and they edit their videos. Like, I don't know if you've seen those controversies of like family vloggers. They accidentally leave like an unedited clip into their video and they post it, and then turns out they're not very great to their children, or they're arguing all the time. Like, that happens all the time, right? So, to extent we feel like we know these people because they show so much, but who knows really like how real these people are. um but I guess that's part of their power. It's like their relatability. I hear like a lot, some major brands these days aren't running campaigns with like celebrities and are focusing more money on like small influencers because people feel like they can trust like an everyday person more than like a celebrity to like tell you to buy something. um but in that way, it's like, can you even trust them because they're being paid? They're being told they're getting stuff for free. Like, they're just, you never know. Sometimes they're authentic and sometimes they're not. So it's a tough line to balance, I feel like.
That kind of leads me into my next question. And what I found as I was kind of comparing the twins, so
Mm-hmm.
looking at Julie and Chloe and their relationship, which is incredibly toxic from what we see. It's one thing I think that they shared was this sense of loneliness, right? So Julie is
Mm-hmm.
incredibly lonely because she has this job at the supermarket. She doesn't seem like she has any real family that treat her kindly anyway,
Yeah.
because she has what the aunt, and that relationship is kind of fraught with all kinds of issues. But and not to give a whole lot of the story away, but she
Yeah.
ends up living in this house that is ultimately given to her by Chloe, um,
Mm-hmm.
but is actually a slum, right? So it's like everything, and so there's this dichotomy of things that look a certain way, a particular veneer, versus what's really there. But the one thing that I think connected them is that sense of loneliness. So even though Chloe has all these followers, she has these brand deals, she's making really good money. Um, she's lonely. There's a incredible loneliness there, but it's just masked.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side of that, Julie is lonely, and it's kind of apparent, like it's no masking to it. It's kind of like what you see is what you get. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I notice as the book progresses, obviously there's this major change in Julie's character, and it becomes kind of like you start to question her moral compass very, very early on, though, because of the
Yeah.
decisions that she makes. And I'm wondering if, in your interpretation, if Julie always had this kind of questionable moral core, or is that something that's exacerbated because of the fame and ultimately taking on Chloe's personality and taking on her identity? Um, I'm curious there.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, I guess since the beginning, she kind of has to have a questionable moral core because the book, the whole premise is that she like steals her sister's life. Like to even take that first step, you kind of have to be really questionable and kind of malevolent in that way. And, maybe not make the best decisions and in the search of like self-interest, to be honest. And it's interesting because I feel like a lot of books where like characters make like a bad decision, they usually have like, oh, I'm like, paying for my sister's like medical expenses, or like there's like some real big reason. But for Julie, it was literally just because like I want it, like I feel like I deserve it. It's like a very selfish type of motivation. So in that way, I feel like it's not like she was born with it. I definitely think it's kind of like a thing that's nurtured into her because she's in this awful environment. But at the beginning of the story where we see her, she definitely has a questionable moral ethic. And as the story goes on, she kind of starts out being very, not anti-influencer, but very like questionable of it, and like very, bitter, and like, but she does maintain that throughout the whole book. Like she's always kind of aware of her position and aware of how things are kind of silly. But once she actually has access to everything and like sees how like fun and great it is, like have all this money and all these products and all the attention, like she still has those like rational thoughts, but it kind of just gets pushed away because she's like so enticed by everything that she has and everything she could potentially have. That it becomes a quieter and quieter part of her that she still sometimes acknowledges, but she's always like, oh, there's this issue, but I'm getting so much stuff, so like whatever. And then she always like places herself kind of as a victim and all of it. It's like, oh yeah, I'm doing all these things, but there's probably somebody else that's like 10 times bigger than me that's doing even worse. She's like doing this like moral like weighting of like her actions so that she's like always kind of in the right. But I mean, objectively, she does awful things like kind of throughout the whole story. Um, but yeah, I feel like definitely it's like the intrigue of social media and the power and the attention definitely just encourages her to step into her questionable decisions more and more as the story goes on.
And I guess too that opens up the other question of, the sympathy that is garnered. I mean, I think it's built in very early in the book, right? We see
Mm-hmm.
how she lives her life. We see that she, especially when you juxtapose it with her twin, and
Yeah.
Chloe, you're just like, well, that's unfortunate. But there is this notion of privilege, right? The idea that
Mm-hmm.
Chloe is able to do this because she kind of hit the lottery and she got with this great adoptive, family and so she's in a different position, right? And but she also in a way with Chloe, it seems as if she herself was was kind of other in this world too, right? The idea that she being of Asian descent, and maybe there not being many Asian influencers or ones that are doing as well. And I think that's touched on in the book. And I'm wondering, is that a reality? Is that something that um, exists within that kind of influencer culture? Like, if you are a person of color, are you kind of seen differently within the influence culture, or do you have like less? Does it impact following, things of that nature?
I think to a certain degree, yes, it does. I mean, in general, I think we can. The great thing about social media is that you do get access to all types of different people, um, because all you need is like a phone and an internet connection, and you can kind of put yourself out there. Um, but becoming like big on social media is like a total other ball game, from just like doing it. Um, there definitely are a lot of big like Asian and people of color influencers out there, but you'll find that like the specific niche and like bubble that Chloe had occupied of like, like the beauty, like the wealthy kind of vibes, it usually is like a specific type of girl. Um, and usually it is like the, gorgeous, skinny, like white girl that, goes to Pilates and like has, tons of other friends that look just like her. And it's kind of this like enviable circle that you want to be part of. Um, of course, I mean, there's like on TikTok, there's a lot of famous, like, especially Asian, because, a lot of Asians have a lot of money these days. There's like those types of influencers too. But, you know, I think for the purpose of this book, I really did focus on like the white influencers kind of not versus, but like how they kind of play with each other. Because at the end of the day, to like make videos about something and to like review a product or to like, go on a vacation or have like anything, you really do need like a basis of like privilege. Like, how are you going to review a skincare product if you can't purchase like a lot of skincare products? Like, you can make like maybe one review on a Neutrogena cream and then like you have nothing left to do. Like, you need those access to certain items and certain wealth to even get started in a meaningful way. And a lot of people that are privileged have a leg up in that situation. Um, and like, especially, I feel like there's a lot of talk about like nepotism influencers these days and like nepotism actors. Like, there are also ways that these people have a leg up, whether like connection to the industry, even if it's not like the internet industry. It's like, like if your dad works in the entertainment industry, then you like kind of get a push that way. Or like if there's like so much of that stuff going on, and it really does impact how big you can get and like how much time you're willing to invest in these things. Even just like putting time aside to make a video, like only certain people would really be able to do that when other people might be like working all the time or like they don't understand social trends because they're like not on their phone like 24/7 absorbing all that. They're like out working. So in a way, it is reflecting real life. Probably because it's fiction, it's more emphasized and it's more. I was gonna say extra again, but you know what I'm trying to say. Um, so it's not like as drastic as it probably is this like portrayed in the book, but it's definitely something that mirrors like a real life essence in a way. I would say, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so the book takes a progressively darker turn,
Mhm.
especially as we move we get to kind of the midpoint and we start moving toward the end of the book. And which I loved. I loved the darker turn. I felt like it fit very well.
So
um,
glad to hear that.
and it teeters
Yeah.
on, horror.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering if that was always the destination, or if as you were writing, did it start to feel like it was moving in that? Did it surprise you as well that it was moving in that way?
It definitely did surprise me. So I did have like this scene of the campfire and this like moment that I don't know if I'm gonna spoil, but it was something that I did want to write. And the whole like destination island thing was very inspired by like real, I don't know if you are aware, but a lot of the times like big beauty companies will like send a bunch of influencers out to an island for like a weekend getaway or like a week long getaway. And I remember very clearly there was one during like tail end of COVID when I remember like scrolling on my social media feed and then seeing like death rates and like people struggling. And then the next one was like this influencer at Bali, like, doing a little clip for a free trip that cost like millions of dollars. Um, and I just remember seeing that and being like, oh my gosh, it's kind of tone deaf, but at the same time, I'm wondering in my head, it's like they're only showing us like a short clip of like what goes on throughout the whole week. And then my brain, I was like, like what if some weird stuff starts happening? Like what don't they show us? Um, and that's kind of where that like one of the creepier scenes come up. I will say it was less horror focused when I was like writing it initially. And as it went through like the agenting process and getting acquired by editors, I feel like they kind of like sniffed out this like horror theme and they were like, okay, let's like really lay into it because they thought that was like very special. So it was there a little bit, but it grew as the novel like matured throughout the publication process.
Your publication journey, what was that
Mhm.
like with this book?
Yeah, this was definitely not my first book. I stopped being an influencer like way before I even started writing. I did start writing like during COVID. I feel like a lot of people took it up as a hobby during then because it's like, what else are you gonna do? Um, Obviously, I was a big fan of like reading and stuff before, but I never really thought of being a writer until just one day I was like, I have time, like let me try this out. And it turns out I really loved it. And then I wrote like a lot of really, really awful books that nobody will ever see, like maybe five. And then on my like sixth or maybe my fifth book, like completed book, I felt it was pretty decent. It was like not this one. It was a completely different genre. It was like YA historical fiction that takes place in the Ming Dynasty. There was a little horror element to it, but it was like based on true facts of like a real emperor that was like absolutely psychotic and like awful. Um, but it was like a totally different novel. But it was like the first novel where I was like, okay, I can query this. Like this is readable. Like people are not gonna like only rate it 1 star because it makes no sense. Um, so I tried to query that. It queried well in the way that I did get a lot of requests for it, but like no offers. So then I wrote some other books. I wrote like I think like 2 books. I tried my hand in fantasy and it didn't work. And then I started thriller, but it was a historical fiction thriller. And then for some reason, like one day I decided to write this one. It was like I did see something on TikTok that kind of gave me this. Of course, I saw it on TikTok, but it kind of inspired me. I was like, this person could be an antagonist in a book. And then, you know, I feel like you must relate, but like once you kind of get that spark, the ideas keep running and then you kind of get into the author brain and then like the whole story kind of pieces together in your head in the shower. And that was like the start of the book. And I actually wrote it super fast because it's the first book I've ever written that I would say like it's not good to say because Julie's like an awful person, but it's kind of close to my voice in the way where it's like a Gen Z, like younger first person voice. While before I like only wrote like, historical fiction, it was more like serious. So it took me longer. But I think because this voice was more me, I actually wrote it pretty fast.
You don't hear about that often, I would say, where you're able to get an agent directly from querying. Usually it's, relationships are formed at conferences and things like that. And then over
Mhm.
time, the agent may say, okay, send me something. So that's really great. How about you tell us where we can learn more about you, find you on social media or online?
Yes. I'm on like Instagram and TikTok. Oh my God, I should have reviewed what my tag is. I think it's like the Liann Z, something like that. I'm sure if you Google my name, it'll come
Okay.
up. I also have a website. It's just my name, liannzhang.com. Um, yeah, that's where you can find me.
Excellent, excellent. So I look forward to your next book. And I wonder, even when I was reading this, I feel like there's definitely a subgenre there, I think, of thrillers that are skew younger, but are set like or at least center on social media. And I'm very interested in this kind of. I think it's a budding genre or subgenre within the thriller
Yeah.
within the thriller scope, because I think that it plays such a huge role in the lives of kind of Gen Z,
Mhm.
and even younger millennials. I think that it's so integrated into kind of everyday life. So I'm fascinated by thrillers and novels that are kind of coming out of this online world. So this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And
Thank
the
you.
book is Julie Chan is Dead, written by
Oh,
Liann Zhang. Thank you for joining us here on the Culture Point, and we'll see you next time.
thank you so much.